top of the world, looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find in the love that I've found ever since you've been around. Your looks put me at the top of the world. I'm on top of.
After a string of hits, the Carpenters took to the road and toured across the States and Europe.
We had a great deal of fun on that tour. It was amazing. We flew around the United States in 2 Learjets, and it became quite clear that if you wanted to get in the Learjet that was going to be fun, you had to go with Richard. The pilot who piloted Richard, the time has passed now, so I think we can talk about this without having the FAA come down on us, would take us and do barrel rolls and go upside down, and it was wonderful fun.
They went from, 2-figure concert fees in early 1970 to 5-figure concert fees by the end of that same year. So success really happened fast for them.
As did the trappings of success.
There was a famous groupie in Dallas who, certainly in the 60s, if you were in the rock and roll business, you'd heard of her. Her name was the Butter Queen. And the Butter Queen had a certain, how shall I say, talent or a certain routine that she apparently was very, very good at and had applied her talents to some of the most famous rock and roll figures of the time. Well, coming backstage one night, the word was that the Butter Queen wanted to do Richard. And it was decided, however, with Karen's agreement, that if the Butter Queen wanted to do Richard, she would have to do Richard and Karen.
But however far away they were from home, they were never far away from their mother.
I worried a lot because they got to bed very late, because the shows there would be 2 shows at night, so they didn't start the second one until 2 in the morning.
There's no question Mom and Dad were real stage moms and dads. And they called frequently, or we had to call back to them. Richard mostly handled that, and it was a yes, Dad, yes, Mom, yes. It was sort of a dutiful son. Now I think probably being on the road helped them to escape much of the direct controlling influence.
Karen and Richard eventually moved out of the family home, only to move in together.
Them moving in together when they left the parents' house seemed odd to us, but
more odd than living at home to me. Yeah,
that was like if you're going to leave the nest, you'd think that at that age they would have just gone to have their own places.
But this closeness fueled speculation about just how close they really were.
Singing love songs as a brother and sister team, I suppose, posed some problems for them. I never heard them talk about it, and it always seemed to me to be perfectly wonderful in particularly the romantic poise that Karen had. I don't know whether they were bothered or troubled by that. I think that there have been occasional jokes in the press about a brother and sister relationship that close.
Oh, brother and sister singing to each other like, we've only just begun, close to you. It's kind of like, I wonder if, the thought goes to one's head. But of course, in those days, we were back in the lovely 70s, and, we were just too well-bred yet, the press was, outside of course, my paper.
Karen had a brief romance with Alan Osmond, but a relentless work schedule left little time for the opposite sex.
And they were both extremely career-oriented. Career was number one, and everything else kind of fell in line after that.
I think the career got in the way of that much more than their tightness as brother and sister or anything, no question. And anyone who's dedicated to a career full-time like that usually has no time for family or loves or anything else. And they took that to the nth degree.
Right.
Her allegiance was to her career, to her brother, to her parents. And of course, she was so busy recording, and her career was her first thing.
Carpenters.
Everybody knew them because they were famous, became famous in a hurry. Oh, it was great. Everything they did was great as far as we were concerned.
I don't believe this. I just don't. I'd just like to say thank you for everything once again.
For Karen, relationships were pretty much impossible. She's traveling on the road with, a crew of 20 guys or whatever who all treat her like little sister and want to take care of her and make sure that nothing happens and nobody is messing with her. So it was really impossible for her to find anybody.
She didn't get into too many romances, no. She was a home girl and a music girl. Richard and Karen were always in the studio together. And believe me, that took up a lot of their life.
I'll say goodbye to love. No one ever cared if I should live or die. Time and time again, the chance for love has passed me by. And
Karen's attention was always focused on Richard, so when he started dating her personal assistant, Karen became very jealous.
I was going out on a date, and Karen said, because she didn't have a date that night, what time do you think you're going to be back? I said, I'm not sure. She said, gee, try not to make it too late or whatever, because I'll tend to worry, which was really the last thing I wanted to hear.
She was tough. She was demanding. My relationship with Richard ended because I think Karen wanted it and insisted upon it, and I basically was given a choice. The choice was to go back on the road with Karen and forget that Richard existed, which was not going to be possible for me to do. She had an argument with Richard, and she said, see, I told you so, it's not going to work. And I remember he looked at me, and I said, right. We both sat at the edge of my bed, and I cried, and he cried. And I said, it's better this way. I mean, for me, it was a test. I loved him enough that I was willing to let him go. If he was going to come back, he was going to come back on his own. I let go because I didn't want to hold on to something that wasn't mine to hold on to.
Mrs. Carpenter didn't like Richard's girlfriends, and Karen supported her mother. And it's like a little girl saying, I'm doing what you're doing, Mummy. Look, can I have the kiss now because I'm doing what you would want me to do? But it's savage. And Richard, poor devil, never had the nous or the emotional energy to say, guys, my life. So both of them are tied into this unholy alliance with their family, which gets sanctified in the name of family values.
Karen's insecurities extended to her performances, where she preferred to hide behind her drums instead of taking center stage.
The problem with getting her out from behind the drums exasperated Richard, because he was well aware of my machinations in trying slowly to bring her out. He couldn't understand why she just didn't walk out there and sing.
For Karen, to sit behind the drums meant hanging on to being Karen, being a bit of a tomboy, so she could wear jeans and a shirt, because you need to wear trousers to work drums. Then along comes Richard and he says, we've done this now, Karen, I really want you to come out from behind the drums. And so did the managers, because she had this beautiful voice. So she comes out from behind the drums, she loses her protection. She has to be seen. And if you have grown up in a family where you were a tomboy, and it now isn't acceptable for you to be a tomboy, you're supposed to be a quote-unquote real girl, the first thing you attack is your weight.
To the best of my recollection, we were playing at a place called Pine Knob outside of Detroit. And some critic commented on the fact that she looked a little chubby. And that bugged her.
The other story is that one of her record company executives told her she had to lose a bit of weight Now that I believe, because right now in this town, you know, there are 10 or 20 or 30 people being told right this second, lose 5 pounds, sweetie. Baby, you look good, but, you know, another 10 pounds would be greater. There is a pressure that is enormous here.
When you are up there in the public eye, or you begin to be up there in the public eye, sooner or later, no matter how talented you are, sooner or later, people around you, professionally and personally, start saying, you look a bit better with a few pounds off.
Women are extremely sensitive about weight. She was like anyone else, only more so, because Karen was a little bit pear-shaped. She had a bottom, kind of like Jennifer Lopez, a full-size bottom, and she was fairly slim otherwise, so she was extremely conscious of her figure all her life. She wanted to be thin, and that's why she starved herself to get that backside small enough.